I call the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr Speaker, the people of Timaru who have been very interested in the position that that member has taken on certain events that have occurred down there will find that speech very interesting. Mr Speaker, I am very interested in the reaction of government members during the contribution of my colleague, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove. I saw all of the heads down as they realised that they have been made a fool of by this particular piece of legislation, and I cannot for the life of me understand why the government have decided to back this silly bill. Now, this is so political that even from the outset, I mean, here we have a bill called the Electoral Disqualification of Convicted Prisoners Amendment Bill. What select committee would you refer that bill to? Would you refer that to the Justice and Electoral Committee? Or would you refer it to the Law and Order Committee?
Justice and Electoral.
I think I'd go for Justice and Electoral. And why would you choose? Can I maybe ask the member who's interjecting in reply to my questions that would otherwise be rhetorical, why would the choice of Justice and Electoral be the choice over Law and Order? Why would one choose the Justice and Electoral Committee or over the Law and Order Committee? Could it have something to do with the fact of the terms of reference of the different committees and who chairs them? Now, who chairs, oh yes, and who the minister is. So, who's the minister responsible for the Justice and Electoral Committee? Could that be Simon Power, Minister of Justice? And who's responsible for electoral law reform? I think that might be Simon Power, Minister of Justice. OK, well, let's look at the Law and Order Committee. Which minister is responsible essentially for the work that goes through the Law and Order Committee? Which minister is that? I think it might be Judith Collins, Minister of Police and Minister of Corrections. OK, so that's good. So then we have the issue of the terms of reference of the particular committees. OK, so what are the terms of reference of Justice and Electoral? Who are the advisors? Who are the advisors to the committee on Justice and Electoral? They might be the justice officials. OK, so we've got that sorted out. Who are the advisors on the Law and Order Committee? That might depend on the bill. So if it's a police bill, then it might be the police, and if it's a corrections bill, then it would be the Department of Corrections. OK, so we've got different ministers and we've got different advisors. OK, and who are the chairs of the relevant committees? OK, the Justice and Electoral Committee is chaired by... Who's Justice and Electoral chaired by? Oh, Chester Burrows. Now, Chester's actually quite a good chair, don't you think? I mean, I actually think that Chester Burrows is quite well regarded. He's spoken openly on some good views because he actually has the advantage of having been a police officer and also a lawyer. So he has the benefit of both sides of those debates. He is an excellent Member of Parliament and I find him very, very good to work with. Now, who is the chair of the Law and Order Committee? The rocket scientist we've heard, the genius we've heard. It's Sandra Gowdy. Now, if you wanted to have a piece of political puffery, would you want it presided over by Simon Power, justice officials and Chester Burrows, or would you like a piece of political puffery presided over by Judith Collins, Corrections and Sandra Gowdy? Which one would you choose for a piece of political puffery? Well, this is actually where the politics of this whole process began. The choice of the Select Committee was absolutely deliberate and it was obvious. Corrections told the Select Committee that they had no expertise in providing the advice in this area. No one can blame Corrections because they were upfront about that. And the second thing is that to blame Parliamentary Council is unacceptable. You cannot blame the Parliamentary Council because they can only operate off the drafting instructions that they receive from the Select Committee, and that advice comes from the department who told them they were not in a position to advise in this area. If Justice had been allowed to advise, they would have picked up on this problem. They have the expertise in this area, and we would not have the nonsense that we have today. This bill actually extends voting rights to the most serious offenders in this country who are currently locked up and behind bars. If this bill were to pass in its current form, then the worst criminals who are in jail at election time next year will be allowed to vote. And that member can blame whoever he likes, but he should look in the mirror and he should talk to Sandra Gowdy and lay the blame where it belongs. That choice of committee was the reason why we have the problems that we have today. Mr. Speaker, if it went to the Law and Order Committee, there had to be a reason on law and order for it to go there. So it's got to have a deterrent effect, and it's got to change prisoner behaviour. One or the other, preferably both, but that would be the reason for sending it there. Not one element of evidence produced anywhere in any of this debate or at the Select Committee showed any deterrent effect. Oh, look, I'm sorry, but if you go to jail for this serious offending or for this minor offending, but we're going to send you to jail, you're not going to be able to vote. Wow. Is that going to put people off? Oh, yeah. Is that seriously going to put people off offending? Right. I don't think so. Is it going to change prisoner behaviour? I mean, look, we're not going to let you vote at the next election. Did you know that member who just resumed his seat before, he didn't tell us how many prisoners currently vote. Do we know how many people we're actually going to affect? Does the member know how many people currently vote from prison? No. Oh, the member sat down. The member sat down before the time was up. I want to know whether that member knows the answer to the question, because I suspect that member doesn't know the answer to the question. Is how many people does he expect to be affected by this bill should it pass through this House? Because how many people currently vote? I am absolutely prepared to stop and hear the answer to the question, and I would like to hear the answer to that question, and that is how many prisoners currently vote? How many currently vote?
He doesn't know.
He actually doesn't know the answer to the question. Not one word in the report back from the Select Committee, not one word on how many people currently vote. So we have no idea how many people are going to be affected. Now, one of the issues that we raised in the report back is this, and that is the question about the person who serves a 2.5-year sentence. And we want to ask this question. Somebody who serves a 2.5-year sentence, who is in prison on the day that the election is held, they will not be able to vote, but somebody who was let out the day before, they will be allowed to vote. What is the sense in this? I mean, what is the point of this? What message are we trying to send? I heard Joe Goodhue say that we're sending a message that you're not allowed to vote if you offend, that it is really bad if you offend. Well, actually, no, you're not, because you're saying as long as you're not in prison on the day that the sentence is occurring. And what about the person who gets home detention and the person who doesn't get home detention for exactly the same offence? I know a case in Christchurch where there were 2 kids up in court, relatively short space aside. One of them went to prison, the other one got home detention, and yet this is going to say different rules. One can vote, one can't. But until the government actually puts some numbers on the table, this is meaningless political puffery. It's nothing else. And I think that this government has got some serious explaining to do, and it's not good enough just to blame officials when you've deliberately set up those officials to fail by choosing the wrong committee, choosing the wrong minister, choosing the wrong advisors, choosing the wrong situation, and choosing an environment that actually produces no deterrence, not 1 ounce of deterrence, and no change to prisoner behaviour, except that the very small number